Chapter 40-33. If she could confirm the existence of the azure water artifact in this space. But her artifact couldn't sense it. This meant, her direction wasn't right. She had already walked one round in the entire space and hadn't found anything. Just where did the problem lie? Let's take a break first and absorb this chi before moving. Old Man Sung saw Yi Qing Luo sitting on the ground without any intention of moving, so he floated to the ground. He sat cross-legged and began to absorb the surrounding chi into his body. The azure water chi was a fatal temptation to Old Man Sung, who was the artifact spirit of the azure dew bracelet. It was like a person who had been starving for a long time. Suddenly, a large portion of his favorite and most delicious food appeared in front of him. There was no way to refuse. Yi Qing Luo saw Old Man Sung's serious attitude of absorbing the true chi and agreed to his suggestion. She still had no clue. Let Old Man Sung have a good meal. She also took advantage of the time she absorbed the chi to think about the specific location of the third artifact. One person and one spiritual body sat cross-legged on the ground. She didn't know how long had passed. Yi Qing Luo opened her eyes in a carefree state. She had to admit that the azure water chi had a great effect on both her and Old Man Sung. Although it wasn't enough to let her advance to the profound grade. But it also strengthened her body's most basic physique. Let her body and mind be cleansed. Being able to cleanse people's hearts was the biggest effect. Using Old Man Sung's words to explain, this azure water true chi was also not suitable for everyone to absorb. For example, the few cuties in her pet space didn't want to come out. Old Man Sung was suitable because he was the artifact spirit of the azure dew bracelet. After all, the 5-piece azure water divine artifact set had been forged after the azure dew bracelet was forged. Quite a few more materials had been obtained, and thus, the 5-piece azure water divine artifact set had been forged. As for her, it might be because she had the divine phoenix profound heart jade and also contracted with 2 artifacts, so she could be considered as the chosen master of the artifacts. Therefore, the azure water chi didn't reject her. Yi Qing Luo stood up and saw Old Man Sung still had his eyes closed and was seriously absorbing the azure water chi. She didn't disturb him. She would wake Old Man Sung after she had a clue to find the third artifact. She didn't know what was going on outside. Xian must have been worried sick when he saw her being dragged away by the vines. She had to think of a way to find the divine artifact and leave this space as soon as possible. Yi Qing Luo cast her vision towards the surroundings. The surrounding azure water true chi continued to spread throughout the entire space. From bottom to top, from left to right, or from right to left, no matter which angle one looked at it from. The sky was filled with a faint red mist. The pale mist seemed very thin. Because she and Old Man Sung had been absorbing for a long period of time, their true energy hadn't gradually decreased. Suddenly, Yi Qing Luo's gaze fixed on a certain spot. Then, his gaze shifted to Old Man Sung. The expression on her face suddenly froze. His gaze alternated between that spot and Old Man Sung's body a few times. It wasn't an illusion, the vast expanses of azure true chi here, they didn't seem to be wandering around in a disorderly manner. Or perhaps they were spontaneously gathering towards Old Man Sung, who was currently absorbing. Instead, it was very orderly, and it was pacing back and forth continuously. She found out, azure water true chi was surging forth from all directions, its true location. Chapter 40-34. Bang bang bang, the deafening cracking sound shook the entire space. The ground shook violently. It could be said to be shaking the earth and mountains. Yi Qing Luo was unable to maintain her balance. But, what made her surprised was, no matter how much this space shook, the surrounding rock walls didn't have any signs of being shaken. Not even a bit of gravel. Seeing this scene, Yi Qing Luo could almost confirm the guess in her heart. Her fingers tightened again. Immediately, a dazzling profound light enveloped her fist. A punch fell again. The entire space shook even more violently. The rumbling sound of collapsing echoed in her ears. The faint red deep water true chi in the surroundings also began to swim uncontrollably in all directions. Wah wah wah, Luo lass, what are you doing? Old man Song was still in a meditative state when he was suddenly flung out due to the shaking of the ground. Even if he was in a spiritual state, this fling, he would still have some reaction. After he opened his eyes, the first feeling was the earth shaking and mountains shaking. His weak spiritual body was sent flying back and forth from the impact. In his ears, there was a deafening explosion sound. And in the sky full of red mist, Old Man Song saw Yi Qing Luo punching a certain rock wall. The blossoming profound light was extremely dazzling. Old Man Song's spiritual body floated towards Yi Qing Luo. As soon as it neared, a crack suddenly appeared in front of her. An intense aura surged out from the crack and assaulted them. Old Man Song was shaken by this sudden force and his entire spiritual body was flung out. This. What's going on? Old Man Song was hit by this force and struggled to support the rock wall to avoid the surging waves and looked at Yi Qing Luo. Until the force surging out of the crack stopped. Yi Qing Luo then slowly approached the crack and said, "The real spirit gathering formation should be here." She pointed to the crack in front. In other words, the azure divine weapon is here. What? Old Man Song was stunned and couldn't understand Yi Qing Luo's words. When I was absorbing the azure water true chi just now, I noticed that the true chi was orderly and continuously lingering around this area. Yi Qing Luo spoke of her own guess, so I followed the direction where the azure aqua chi lingered and found this place. She slowly placed her hand on the gap. The light coming from the other side of the gap was blinding. It was as if everything was covered by a faint red mist. She could not see clearly what was happening on the other side. She closed her eyes slightly. The profound light burst forth once again. A dazzling profound glow burst out from Yi Qing Luo's body. The vigorous power collided with the crack. As the earth shook and the mountains shook, the commotion became more and more intense. The crack suddenly split open. The gap between the cracks wasn't big, but it was just enough for Yi Qing Luo alone to enter through this crack. Old Man Song listened to Yi Qing Luo's explanation in a daze, and looked at her actions. Until Yi Qing Luo walked into the crevice. He still didn't understand what was going on. Seeing that Yi Qing Luo had already entered the other end of the fissure, Old Man Song's spiritual body swayed and immediately floated to Yi Qing Luo's side. "Lass Luo, what is this place? You said the divine weapon is here, what's going on?" His voice just fell. The red mist in the surroundings surged over. Everything in front of them was dyed by the faint red mist. Chapter 40-35. From the looks of it, there wasn't much difference from the space they were in before. But Old Man Song's originally puzzled pupils suddenly contracted. The expression on his face, little by little, became solemn and dignified. Different. The vast aqua chi here was obviously different from the outside space. Previously, he kept saying how pure and rich the vast aqua chi was, and how it made people feel carefree. But after feeling the vast aqua chi here, Old Man Song then knew what was called true purity, rich. If I didn't guess wrongly, that space should be an illusion. Yi Qing Luo explained, "Just now, when I found the real spirit gathering array, the entire space was shaking, but the surroundings didn't have a single piece of gravel falling. The earth shook, swaying endlessly, and all kinds of collapsing explosions could be heard. How could there not be a single piece of gravel? The only explanation was only that place was fake. Everything they saw was an illusion, an illusion. If it was a timid person, after feeling the earth shake, all kinds of collapses, either they left like they were fleeing, or they were scared to death by the illusion." Yi Qing Luo slowly raised her hand, the corners of her mouth slightly hooked. "Old Man Song, look." Following Yi Qing Luo's line of sight, only to see her raised hand. There was a ring on his fingertip, and there was a small flame that looked like it was burning. And on her wrist, that red silk chain also glowed with a red light. Between the vast aqua divine weapons. Response. Old Man Sung saw the changes of the two divine weapons, and a trace of surprise appeared on his face. Yes. Response. The vast aqua divine weapon had a response. This also meant. Here, there was indeed the existence of the vast aqua divine weapon. Old Man Sung was obviously excited. No wonder we couldn't find the whereabouts of the vast aqua divine weapon, it was hidden here. Yi Qing Luo looked down at the vast aqua ring and vast aqua silk chain. Tightly, her fingertips stroked above. She lifted her feet and followed the response of the divine weapons. The mist around them continued to spread. If it wasn't for the fact that the color was very, very light. There really was a feeling of blood mist pervading. Because of the richness of the azure aqua chi, Yi Qing Luo could only see clearly in front of her, within a range of about 20 meters. He followed his senses and walked forward for a long time. Layer after layer of deep water true chi was pushed aside. A faintly discernible shadow gradually appeared in front of him. The reaction of the ring and the silk chain was also getting stronger. The divine artifact was right there. As Yi Qing Luo got closer. In the faint red mist, that figure slowly appeared in front of Yi Qing Luo. It was a tall stone wall. It was rectangular and radiated with a pure and holy velvet light. As she got closer, Yi Qing Luo could see the exquisite murals carved on the stone walls. It was almost the same as the stone wall in the cave outside. It was a mural of the Divine Emperor. A mural of the vast water divine artifact. On top of that, there was a complicated and mysterious totem. The only difference was that this stone wall was a type of jade that was almost translucent and sparkling. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the sacred velvet light that shrouded the murals was not emitted by the stone walls. Instead, it was the exquisitely carved murals on the stone walls. Every line emitted a faint velvet glow. He just looked at her. It gave people a feeling of holiness and beauty. She would come to this place. It was precisely because of that stone wall in the cave that allowed her to enter the interior of the stone wall. Actually, this mural in front of her was the real stone wall, right? Chapter 4036. The Emperor of Divine Emperors, Old Man Sung's voice was also unable to conceal his excitement. He widened his eyes and looked at the stone wall in front of him. There's the aura of the Divine Emperor on it. Yi Qing Luo's vision looked up and down the stone wall, and the vast water god relic is also in this stone wall. The conditions for the formation of azure water true chi were divine artifacts and the blood of divine emperors. The divine weapon was inside the stone wall. The blood of the divine emperor must be in the stone wall. It was normal for the stone wall to have the aura of a divine emperor. Yi Qing Luo's gaze finally fell onto the mural, that graceful human figure mural. Compared to the previous two stone walls, this mural was much more lifelike. From these murals, one could see that the Emperor of the Divine Emperor was an outstanding celestial being. For some reason, when his eyes met the eyes of the Divine Emperor carved on the mural, Lin Mengya's heart trembled. Yi Qing Luo's heart suddenly jolted. It was as if he had been violently shaken by something. His heart couldn't stop beating wildly. The pair of eyes on the mural was clearly carved out. But it gave Yi Qing Luo a feeling that she was looking into his eyes. That pair of eyes seemed to be alive. It was sending her some kind of message. It also felt like it was calling out to her. Little girl? Little girl? Beside his ear, Old Man Sung's somewhat indistinct voice called out. She couldn't hear it clearly. His eyes reflected the mural in front of him. Suddenly, Yi Qing Luo's arm was abruptly burned by something. A burning sensation spread across her arm. She was in pain, and her dazed eyes instantly regained their brightness. Lowering her eyes, she looked at the scorching area. It was the azure dew bracelet. It was releasing energy. Circles of light that resembled electric currents jumped about in excitement. Old Sung. She blinked her eyes. She didn't quite understand why the azure dew bracelet had gone out of control. At some unknown time, Old Man Song had burrowed into the azure dew bracelet. In her mind, Old Man Song's voice came with a sigh of relief. You little girl, what happened just now? It's like you've lost your soul. No matter how I call you, you won't respond. Just now? Yi Qing Luo frowned as she tried to recall what had happened earlier. Wasn't it just standing here and looking at the murals? Did Old Man Song call her? There seemed to be. It was just that he was too engrossed in looking at the murals and didn't pay attention to it. Yi Qing Luo thought in this way. Suddenly, his eyes widened. Her eyes, which were as bright as stars, overflowed with shock. No, that's not right. No matter how entranced she was by the murals, she would never ignore Old Man Song. Furthermore, he wouldn't be uncertain if Old Man Song had called out to her. Old Man Song. Yi Qing Luo's voice sounded a little tense. Old Song was still in the azure dew bracelet. What's wrong? Yi Qing Luo tightened her fingers. This mural seems to be able to seduce people's hearts. Just now, I seem to have lost my consciousness because of the Emperor of Gods on this mural. Old Man Song was slightly startled and didn't speak for a long time. He sensed that something was wrong with Yi Qing Luo. Thus, he had specially returned to the azure dew bracelet. Making use of the soul contract between the azure dew bracelet and Yi Qing Luo, he awakened her from the depths of her soul. But unexpectedly, there was something wrong with her just now. It was because of the murals on the stone walls. Yi Qing Luo didn't urge Old Man Song to answer. After a moment of silence, Old Man Song slowly came out from the azure dew bracelet. On his face was a kind of, very complicated, very strange expression. Chapter 40-37. Just now, what did you see on the stone wall? Old Man Song asked. Then, he thought of something and added, what I'm referring to is, what do you think you saw after you lost consciousness? Yi Qing Luo knitted her brows tightly, her mind constantly searching for the memories just now. But she felt that the memory was exceptionally blurry. She couldn't even remember the details of the mural clearly. She pursed her lips and thought for a while. I was just studying the mural, wanting to know where to get the exact location of the vast water artifact, but, later, speaking to this point, Yi Qing Luo stopped. She thought for a long time. But in her memory, it was all hazy and blurry. She scratched her head. In her mind, a pair suddenly appeared, jet black like the stars in the night, resplendent glass-like eyes. Quiet and gentle, elegant and gentle. It seemed to contain indescribable, inexhaustible deep feelings. That pair of eyes flashed across her mind for a moment. Yi Qing Luo suddenly felt an inexplicable shock in her body and mind. She licked her lips and answered, yes. I just saw the eyes on the mural. It's the eyes. It was that pair of eyes that seemed to be able to hook people's souls. Let her only meet those eyes for a moment. Then she was a little absent-minded. This kind of situation rarely appeared. With the wisdom of 2 lifetimes, very few people could shake her willpower. That pair of eyes seemed to really exist on the stone wall. Eyes. After Old Man Song heard Yi Qing Luo's answer, the expression on his face became more and more solemn. He stared at Yi Qing Luo for a long time. Suddenly, his figure floated and his spiritual body was close to the stone wall. His height was exactly the same as that pair of eyes on the stone wall. He only looked for a few breaths. Old Man Song quickly retracted his gaze and bowed towards the direction of the mural, as if apologizing for his rude behavior. After doing all this, Old Man Song looked at Yi Qing Luo. Lass Luo, do you believe me? Yi Qing Luo's gaze wandered between the stone wall and Old Man Song, vaguely understanding something. She didn't hesitate and nodded, I do. Old Man Song was the first person she truly trusted since she came to this strange world. She had said it countless times. Old Man Song was her elder. Since he chose to live and die together with Old Man Song, how could she not believe him? Even though she was very clear in her heart that Old Man Song had concealed many things from her. Listening to Yi Qing Luo's reply, the expression on Old Man Song's face changed slightly. Then, he continued in a serious and solemn voice, "Drip your blood on these eyes." Yi Qing Luo was stunned for a moment before she understood Old Man Song's meaning. "You're saying, the stone wall's eye is the key to unlocking this spirit-gathering array?" "Yes." Old Man Song replied, "You reacted to the pair of eyes on the mural, which means that the power hidden within those eyes is extremely great." Yi Qing Luo nodded in understanding. He raised his hand without the slightest hesitation. The devouring flame fan swept past his fingertips. 2 drops of blood dripped onto the pair of eyes in the mural. When he dripped his blood onto the pair of eyes, his eyes trembled. Yi Qing Luo wanted to look at that pair of eyes to ascertain the position of the eyes. And this one glance. Yi Qing Luo suddenly felt a trembling feeling assaulting her. Immediately after, there was a sharp pain in her fingers. His finger, which was pressed against the stone wall, felt as if it had been bitten by something. Chapter 4038. She hadn't had the time to see what was going on with the stone wall. She had just raised her head. What greeted him was the surging red mist. It wasn't the light mist of the azure water chi. But it was so thick that apart from a patch of red, it was still a patch of red mist. In a split second, it had already blurred her eyes. And then, she clearly felt that the red mist had completely wrapped her up. There was a burning feeling. She wanted to open her eyes and struggle. But her body seemed to be bound by an unknown force. She couldn't move at all. At this moment, Old Man Song, who was standing beside the stone wall, saw everything in front of him clearly. He personally saw the girl dripping blood onto the stone wall's eyes. He personally saw the eyes on the stone wall surging with thick red mist and enveloping Yi Qing Luo. He didn't stop her. He even took a few steps back. His eyes were tightly staring at the figure in the red mist. On his face, there was a worried expression and he was trying his best to restrain himself. Yi Qing Luo's eyes were tightly shut. She didn't know how long the feeling of being bound had lasted. She only knew, she tried to use her mental power to struggle and caused her body to fall into a state of fatigue. The red mist that lingered around her gradually dissipated. The feeling of being bound also gradually subsided. Her body was gently placed on the ground by the red mist. Her body had just touched the ground. Her limbs could just move. Yi Qing Luo bounced back almost instantly and flipped up from the ground. This movement also caused her head to feel a sharp pain as if it was being torn apart. Her mental power had been used up too much, exceeding the body's load. Reminding her to rest. Yi Qing Luo suppressed the pain in her head and slowly stood up, quickly looking around vigilantly. The scene in front of her. But it made Yi Qing Luo stunned. In front of her, it wasn't the kind of space that was completely enveloped by the azure water chi. But it was a huge and magnificent graveyard that was above the void. Yes, graveyard. The place where she was standing was the entrance to the graveyard. The entrance that was suspended in midair. Surrounding this target was a sky that was almost purplish-black in color. It was as if a purplish-black ink was used to dye the entire sky. It set off this gloomy and treacherous purplish-black color in all directions. Yi Qing Luo looked around and all she could see was this color. It was very depressing. Yi Qing Luo took a few steps forward. He stuck his head out to look at the bottom of the graveyard. It was also a deep purplish-black color. At a glance, large patches of purplish-black seemed to distort. Yi Qing Luo paid careful attention. These large patches of purplish-black were not fixed. Instead, they were like clouds, drifting slowly one by one. When he looked down, occasionally, the peaks of a few mountains could be seen. Yi Qing Luo retracted her line of sight and shifted her gaze to the front. This huge and hair-raising graveyard. This graveyard was not as dark and gloomy as he had imagined, filled with all kinds of bones. On the contrary, it looked like an old castle. In a castle under the treacherous, gloomy purplish-black sky. That stone wall, why did it bring her to this graveyard? Could it be the third azure water divine artifact, was it in this graveyard? Yiqing Luo slowly walked towards the cemetery. Raising his hand, he tried to push open the stone gate at the entrance of the graveyard. But, no matter how hard she tried, the stone door remained motionless. She frowned, not understanding the situation in front of her. Old Man Song made her use her fresh blood to open the enchantment on the stone wall. Chapter 4039. Why was it that she couldn't even enter this tomb now? Or perhaps, what other operations were needed to open the tomb entrance stone door? Yiqing Luo walked around the stone door and sized it up. She even used her hands to touch everywhere to see if there were any mechanisms. But after fumbling around for a while, nothing was found. This made Yiqing Luo very puzzled. She stopped her hand movements and sat down leaning against the stone door. She raised her head and carefully scanned every inch of the stone door. After that, she looked at the surroundings of the stone door. Around the stone door, there were complicated carvings. The entire tomb, every place, seemed to be meticulously piled up and carved. This tomb was really quite big. At one glance, she couldn't see the outline of the tomb, nor could she see the whole tomb. Such a huge tomb, and it was suspended in midair. Yiqing Luo was very curious. How on earth was this tomb supported, stabilized in midair? All kinds of questions lingered in Yiqing Luo's heart. She sat for a while. Her mind couldn't think of any useful information. She must think of a way to get the third divine relic as soon as possible and leave the stone wall. She couldn't keep wasting time here. The longer the time dragged, the more worried Dmo Xian would be. Everyone would also be worried about her and upset. Yiqing Luo stretched her waist and was preparing to stand up again to continue looking for the azure water divine relic. Her finger suddenly felt a tingling. She raised her hand to take a look. The cut on her finger, probably because she had knocked against the tomb's stone door, the wound had split open again. She touched her finger, but didn't put it to heart. But she didn't discover. When her finger knocked against the stone door, blood gushed out and fell on the stone door. But in the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the stone door. When Yiqing Luo stood up, the azure water ring and azure water chain suddenly produced a huge reaction. It was in her hand, constantly vibrating. Even her hand followed the vibration. The azure water divine relic's reaction made Yiqing Luo stunned. She looked at her hand, and the azure water ring and silk chain that were releasing energy. Her eyes suddenly lit up. This was the reaction between the divine relic. Through this reaction, she could quickly find the third azure water divine relic. Yiqing Luo immediately concentrated, maintaining a spiritual connection with the azure dew ring and the silk chain that were vibrating in her hands. Suddenly, her feet felt light. His feet stepped on air. Then, he activated the falling mode. However, the fall this time was not as long as before. In the blink of an eye, she fell to the ground. The surrounding scenery transformed into a space filled with white fog. What attracted Yiqing Luo's attention was the stone bench in the middle of the space, which was flickering with a faint red glow. The light was indeed very weak. But in this vast expanse of whiteness, no matter how weak that red light was, it was extremely eye-catching. Yiqing Luo walked over. The closer they got, the light grew brighter. And the reaction of the two divine artifacts in his hands was also greater. Yiqing Luo only stopped when she was 3 steps away from the stone bench. The white jade bench was smooth and exuded a bit of cold air. Placed atop the stone bench was a palm-sized jade pendant. The jade pendant was in the shape of a cherry blossom, decorated with a red thread similar to the azure water chain. The jade pendant was a transparent red color. Like a red watery light, rippled on the jade pendant. Every petal was extremely exquisite. Traces of red light emitted out. Chapter 4040. Yiqing Luo didn't head up immediately to pick up that piece of jade pendant. The third piece of god relic was hidden too deeply. Layers and layers of traps. It was obvious that it didn't want anyone to know the whereabouts of this piece of jade pendant. Yiqing Luo naturally wouldn't be so silly as to leave. The stone stool which the jade pendant was placed on was emitting an intimidating pressure. If she went forward rashly, she would probably be attacked by the aura surrounding the stone stool. She pursed her lips tightly as she looked down at the ring and silk chain in her hands. These two pieces of god relic kept on vibrating, as though it was trying to drag her towards the direction of the jade pendant. Yiqing Luo raised her hand and suppressed the agitation of the god relic. She raised her eyes slightly as she looked at the jade pendant which kept on tempting her. She remembered, just like when she was battling with the King of Darkness. The King of Darkness had once told her, her divine phoenix profound heart jade was a radar to locate the god relic, and the key to get the vast aqua divine relic. If she used the divine phoenix profound heart jade's energy, would she be able to get the jade pendant? This thought arose in Yiqing Luo's heart and made her eager to try. She didn't have the time to continue delaying. The blood-colored fog which lingered in the surroundings became thicker and thicker. It almost swallowed her whole. Ever since she fell into the stone wall during the battle with the King of Darkness, the scenery she saw kept on changing. She wasn't sure if the scenery and environment in front of her was real, or fake. She wasn't sure if she would change into another environment in the next moment. Which meant the third vast aqua divine relic had just passed by. Yiqing Luo didn't hesitate as her slender fingers slowly pressed on her heart. She closed her eyes. She started to release the divine phoenix profound heart jade's energy. The alluring red glow slowly seeped into her palm which was at her heart. Following that, the glow slowly grew bigger. It started to stretch out towards the stone stool which was 3 steps away. Which was the moment when Yiqing Luo released the divine phoenix profound heart jade's energy. The thick red mist in the surroundings suddenly rose into the air. It was actually heading towards Yiqing Luo's divine phoenix profound heart jade's energy. Directly intertwined with that energy. When the two forces collided, Lin Fan's eyes widened. Yiqing Luo suddenly opened her eyes. An indescribable emotion surged in his heart. What kind of feeling was that? It was as if the divine phoenix profound heart jade that had been released from her body had found its home. It had found the feeling of home. The surging red mist was completely compatible with the power of the divine phoenix profound heart jade. As they intertwined with each other, they fused together in a short moment. Yiqing Luo had also discovered it. The stone bench that originally held the jade pendant was shrouded in layers of red mist, and it actually merged with the divine phoenix profound heart jade. The power of the divine phoenix profound heart jade was connected to her heart, and also to her soul. When the two powers fused, Yiqing Luo suddenly felt a huge surge of energy surging into her body. It was as if her body was suddenly stuffed with something. In an instant, he felt a sharp pain from the swelling. Yiqing Luo let out a muffled groan as her 5 fingers clasped the front of her chest. She furrowed her brows. Suppressing the weird feeling in his body, he raised his head to look at the jade pendant. The jade pendant was no longer shrouded in red mist. At this moment, it appeared even more sparkling and translucent. The red glow that flowed on the petals was extremely demonic. Following Yiqing Luo's breathing. Chapter 40-41. You can take it. These 4 words surfaced in Yiqing Luo's mind. Just as she was about to take a step closer to the jade pendant. That jade pendant which was lying quietly on the stone bench suddenly flew up. This movement. The cherry blossom-like jade pendant turned into blossoming flower petals as it sprinkled downwards. But after a moment, Yiqing Luo's surroundings were already covered with cherry blossom rain. Yes, cherry blossom rain. The kind of cherry blossom rain which was extremely Chinibu. It covered the sky and earth as it lingered downwards. And what made Yiqing Luo most surprised was every petal of the falling cherry blossom rain seemed to be covered in a red, watery light, and ripples spread out in the air. What situation was this? How did the jade pendant turn into a flower petal rain? Was this the Azure Dew Jade's special ability? Yiqing Luo looked at the falling cherry blossom rain in a daze. Suddenly, the extremely Chinibu cherry blossom rain turned into a ray of red light as it instantly flowed into her body. Her eyes widened as her expression became even more dazed. But following that, there was no time for her to be dazed. The moment that Chinibu red light flowed into her body, the thick red mist in the surroundings suddenly began to collapse. The smooth and holy stone bench suddenly exploded into pieces. Yiqing Luo retreated in shock. Her body had just moved. That body, which was originally filled with energy, seemed to have something stirring fiercely in her body. Her limbs and bones were instantly rushed into by this huge force. Buzz, his mind shook violently, and a buzzing sound rang out continuously. She cried out, "Ah," as her petite body swayed and she couldn't stand steadily as she fell onto the ground. This was no longer a feeling that could be described as pain. It was as if every tendon in her body was forcefully torn apart and then stuffed with something and then stitched up again. And when the stirring feeling came, every part of her body felt like it was being pricked by needles. It was so painful that she couldn't wait to cut off all her tendons and meridians to release that swelling pain. She fell onto the ground as her body curled up. Her mouth kept making low and painful moans. If this went on, her body might not be able to withstand the pressure and explode to death. Yiqing Luo bit her lower lip as she maintained her consciousness. She must not lose herself in the pain. Once her consciousness was devoured, she might never be able to open her eyes again. Little girl Luo, little girl Luo. Suddenly, several breaths of time passed by his ears. Those cries caused her to open her eyes despite the pain. Purplish black, a patch of purplish black, it was the sky of the graveyard. Yiqing Luo's breathing tightened as her gaze wandered around. There was indeed no longer a thick red mist in all directions. Instead, it was an oppressive purplish-black color. It was as if her eyes were going to be dyed purplish-black. She returned to the graveyard from the place where the artifact was placed. Perhaps it was because of the sudden change in the scene before him. The intense pain in Yiqing Luo's body stopped the teasing. It also gave her a moment to catch her breath. However, it was only for a moment. That kind of power surged through her limbs and bones. It was powerful and majestic, filling every single one of her tendons and squeezing every inch of her body. His vision became blurry and hazy again. In a trance, she vaguely saw a complicated totem on the stone door of the entrance of the cemetery. It was very familiar. Like she had seen it somewhere before. Yiqing Luo wanted to identify it seriously. Ah. Chapter 40-42. Girl Luo. Girl Luo. At the same time, those calls sounded again. She opened her eyes. What entered his eyes was Old Man Sung's worried face. He floated above her, floating back and forth, his mouth constantly muttering, calling out to her. Seeing Yiqing Luo open her eyes, Old Man Sung was wild with joy as he swooped down and stopped beside Yiqing Luo. Luo lass? Yiqing Luo's eyelashes fluttered as her breathing stagnated for a moment. Girl Luo, what's wrong? What happened? Old Man Sung saw that Yiqing Luo didn't respond for a long time and was extremely worried. Yiqing Luo wanted to respond. But as soon as he opened his mouth, the powerful energy surging in her body caused her face to turn pale. Her entire delicate body curled up a little. It was as if some kind of power was about to explode from her body. The pain was unbearable. Hear her muffled groan of pain. Old Man Sung became more and more anxious. He wanted to touch her, but the spirit body passed through her body. He was so anxious that his wrinkled face was scrunched up. But Yiqing Luo's current state made her unable to answer him. Old Man Sung could only return to the Azure Dew bracelet and use it to check on Yiqing Luo's body. With this investigation, Old Man Sung was stunned. Little Luo, what's going on? Inside your body. How could it? Within Yiqing Luo's body, her limbs and bones, her internal organs, Every meridian was filled with a thick and majestic energy. Squeezed into Yiqing Luo's body, there was not a single gap. These energies continuously intertwined with the power of the divine phoenix profound heart jade, stirring, under such circumstances. Yiqing Luo could still maintain her consciousness. Just how strong was his willpower? Even if it was him, he wouldn't dare to say that he could endure such inhumane torture. Old Man Song was filled with shock and heartache. Girl, just how much energy did you absorb? Old Man Song used the azure dew bracelet and began to divide the energy within Yiqing Luo's body. But by doing this, it only slightly reduced Yiqing Luo's pain. He had to first suppress the restless power in her body. After that, he would slowly absorb it. But, they were still trapped in this stone wall. How could they help Luo Yu suppress her power? For the first time, Old Man Song felt so powerless. At this moment, Old Man Song only heard a pang explosion. All of a sudden, a crack appeared above the space that was filled with dark water true qi. It was as if someone had torn a rift out of thin air. Then, a purple figure descended from the sky like a god. His sleeves moved slightly. The young girl who was curling up in pain on the ground was pulled into his arms. The purple-robed man stared at the person in his arms. The girl's forehead was covered in cold sweat. Her lips were pale, but her face was abnormally flushed. The aura emanating from his body was so chaotic that it seemed like a volcano would erupt at any moment. The man's handsome face darkened. His peach blossom eyes narrowed. The corners of his eyes were cold and bloodthirsty. Lord Di Zun. Old Man Song's face lit up with joy when he saw who it was. The spiritual body immediately drilled out of the azure dew bracelet. However, the man didn't even give him a look, as he kept staring at Yiqing Luo. Chapter 40-43. If the power within Luo Lass continues to riot. Luo Lass is very likely. Possibly. At this point, Old Man Song pursed his lips and couldn't continue. Dmo Xian's face was cold as his gaze suddenly shifted towards Old Man Song. He didn't seem to move. But he waved his sleeves. Like a purple flowing cloud rolling over and over. A tyrannical profound light swept up a horrifying chi wave as it headed straight towards Old Man Song. Old Man Song's face congealed slightly. He could dodge but he didn't. He allowed that chi wave to hit his body. Bang! Old Man Song's spirit body swayed from the hit. The lingering white light on his body also dissipated like smoke. His spirit body also became much thinner. But Old Man Song's expression didn't change. He also didn't complain that his spirit body's power had been reduced by a third. If there's a next time, no matter how much Luo Air respects you, this Lord will make your soul scatter. Dmo Xian said coldly, his voice seemed to be condensed with frost. So cold that it made one's heart go cold. Old Man Song lowered his head slightly, his voice was obviously a bit weak. This matter, it's my fault, I miscalculated the absorption rate of the divine phoenix profound jade, causing Luo Lass to become like this. He should bear Dmo Xian's palm. It was indeed him who made Yiqing Luo use her own blood to open the passage in the stone wall and enter the enchantment. Only Yiqing Luo could enter this enchantment. Only Yiqing Luo could get the third divine weapon. Of course, his goal wasn't just to let Yiqing Luo get the third divine weapon. But this place. Everything here was beneficial to Yiqing Luo. Almost certainly. He could use this opportunity to let Yiqing Luo advance to the profound grade. But he miscalculated the greed of the divine phoenix profound jade. It had actually absorbed so much of the vast water chi. Plus the power of the divine weapon entering the body. It made Yiqing Luo's body completely unable to bear this burden. Old Man Song's guilty tone made Dmo Xian frown slightly. He stared at Old Man Song for a moment before quickly retracting his gaze and spitting out coldly. Scram! If it wasn't for the fact that Old Man Song was the object of Yiqing Luo's respect. Just based on the fact that Old Man Song injured his little Luo Air, even if he was scared out of his wits, he would not be able to vent his anger. Old Man Sung sensed Dmo Xian's rage, but didn't have any intention of returning to the Azure Dew bracelet. Instead, he looked worriedly at the person in his arms. Luo lass, perhaps it was the mention of Yiqing Luo's name. Curled up in Dmo Xian's arms, Yiqing Luo, who was in so much pain that her body couldn't stop trembling, suddenly clutched tightly onto Dmo Xian's lapel as her painful breathing became hurried. Dmo Xian lowered his gaze. He looked at the girl's face, which was becoming more and more abnormally red. Even his body began to turn red. She was drenched in cold sweat and her robe was soaked. This was a sign that the energy in his body was unable to calm down and was about to erupt. Yiqing Luo's body, he couldn't hold on any longer. However, even though the person in his arms was in so much pain, her hands were clutching his clothes tightly. It was as if he was trying to stop his attitude towards Old Man Sung. Dmo Xian held her hand tightly. Looking at the person in his arms who was in pain, the frost in the depths of his obsidian eyes deepened. In the end, his gaze only coldly swept over Old Man Sung in an extremely shallow and indifferent manner. His imposing manner was restrained by a lot. Xian. Chapter 40-44. What entered her nostrils was the man's elegant sandalwood scent. The familiar smell, the warm broad chest, made her tense nerves relax in an instant. Following that, her consciousness began to dissipate. The powerful and awe-inspiring majestic power was like the rolling waves in her body. The sweat on her forehead due to the severe pain flowed down her cheeks. Her gorgeous face was extremely pale. Her brows were tightly knitted together. Her face was full of pain. Looking at such a painful young lady, Dmo Xian's heart was also in pain. He bowed his head. The shadow blocked the worry in his dark eyes. His thin lips were printed on the young lady's lips, which were tightly bitten because of the pain. The tip of his tongue moved slightly. He picked up the young lady's self-harming behavior. He could vaguely taste the bloody smell from the young lady's lips. Dmo Xian's pupils shrank slightly. Deep in his eyes, there was some heartache. The moment he kissed the young lady, Dmo Xian could clearly feel, from the young lady's mouth, there was a powerful force. He sighed softly. The tip of his tongue moved again. A drop of blood, along the tip of the tongue, fell into Yiqing Luo's mouth. Faintly, there was a glimmer. The moment the man's blood, along Yiqing Luo's throat, slid into her body. It was like when the raging fire was burning, it was covered with a layer of coldness, relieving all her discomfort. It was like a warm spring, seeping into her limbs and bones, gently brushing over every corner of her body. In an instant, it suppressed the surging power in her body. That strand, squeezing in Yiqing Luo's body, tendons and other places, slowly followed the power brought by that drop of blood, and calmed down. Not like the squeezing, fighting and entanglement earlier, but extremely smoothly spread out in Yiqing Luo's body. Yiqing Luo's fingers, which were holding Dmo Xian's clothes, slowly loosened. Her half-hazy eyes blinked slightly. The cold sweat on her eyelashes was blinked off. Clearly met with the man's doting and warm eyes. "Don't be anxious," Dmo Xian spoke in a gentle voice, as if the warmth seeped into Yiqing Luo's heart. Her ear was pressed against the man's chest. Listening to the sound of his heartbeat made one feel at ease. Follow your most direct reaction. I believe Lil Luo can definitely do it. The man's gentle voice was very close. She didn't understand the meaning of Dmo Xian's words. Before he could ask, suddenly, her delicate body shook violently. Dense and majestic dark force was circulating rapidly in his body. All the muscles and bones in his body were swept away. There were huge waves surging within Yiqing Luo's body, slapping against it continuously. The sudden fluctuation of energy. It didn't make her feel the unbearable pain she had just now. Instead, it was as if something was colliding, slapping, and sweeping away again and again. Slowly, the door opened. The power released by the divine phoenix profound heart jade began to slowly absorb the dark force that collided with it. Wave after wave. Round and round. After an unknown amount of time. Finally, in Yiqing Luo's mind, no, more accurately, from head to toe, a muffled boom came from the air around him. Yiqing Luo's vibrating dark force suddenly dispersed in all directions. It was like a magnificent red sunset, rippling in the air. Her aura gradually changed. The fluctuation of the profound grade was also surging continuously. Sage profound 5th grade, sage profound 6th grade, the profound grade's aura was still surging. Chapter 40-45. If there were other people around, they would definitely be scared out of their wits by the scene in front of them. Perhaps, if the World Mercenary Group's brothers or familiar elders saw this, they would be shocked. For example, Old Man Song, who was floating by the side, was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped to the ground. He knew how abnormal Yiqing Luo was. But he didn't expect Yiqing Luo to be so abnormal. Abnormal to the extent that it couldn't even be described. If it was previously in Nirvana realm, Yiqing Luo's various kinds of advancement made everyone excited. But now in the Earth realm, the higher the profound grade, the harder it was to advance. Especially the profound grade of the virtuous profound grade. It was equivalent to the chance of advancement, from 80% to 20%. Among these 20%, those who could advance successfully might have spent hundreds of years and expended huge amounts of resources. But how long had it been since Yiqing Luo advanced to virtuous profound 4th grade? Now she had advanced again. And it was another advancement. This was comparable to the speed of lightning. Old Man Sung expressed that every time he saw Las Luo's advancement, he would be shocked. Probably the next time, he would be numb. Seeing that Yiqing Luo was obviously out of danger, Old Man Song raised his hand and pressed on his scattered spiritual body as he sighed helplessly. His figure swayed. The spiritual body returned to the Azure Dew bracelet. The advancement of profound energy was still lingering. Yiqing Luo's energy had completely merged with the divine phoenix profound heart jade and could be released anytime and anywhere. After the advancement, the energy gradually settled down. Yiqing Luo only felt comfortable. After she opened her eyes, in front of her was a hazy fog. A bundle of warmth enveloped her body. She blinked her eyes to clear her mind. She could see clearly that she was completely naked, soaking in a hot spring. The elegant floral fragrance mixed with a faint medicinal fragrance entered her nose. Yiqing Luo raised her hand and touched the water surface. Where was this place? Did Dmo Xian bring her here? She seemed to remember. Before the advancement, she saw Dmo Xian. And because Dmo Xian came in time, only then was she able to suppress the violent energy in her body. Then she was able to advance. It seemed. Was it because of a drop of his blood? She was still pondering. Suddenly, he felt something warm beside his ear. A pair of broad and thick palms landed on her shoulders. In an instant, his skin felt as if it had been set on fire, and it was burning hot. You're finally awake. The man's low and hoarse voice was as mellow as fine wine. In this warm and comfortable hot spring, his voice was even more intoxicating. Yiqing Luo didn't move as she held the man's arm and leaned back. The fog obscured the unadorned face, which was still exceedingly beautiful. Dmo Xian's figure pressed down slightly as his lips curled into a smile. This time's advancement seems to be rather strenuous for you. Yiqing Luo raised her hand and blocked in front of her. She also blocked the man's kiss. The water droplets splashed onto Dmo Xian's body. The man's thin lips were also imprinted on her palm. There was a slight burning sensation. Dmo Xian didn't mind as he raised his hand and caught the little hand that he had kissed. Then, he brought it to his lips and kissed it. His thin lips curled into a smile with some unclear meaning. Do you know how long you took to advance this time? Yiqing Luo felt a little itchy and her delicate body was also trembling slightly because of the man's indistinct teasing. Somehow, she felt that there was an inexplicable displeasure in the man's tone. Chapter 40-46. Yiqing Luo wanted to look back at Dmo Xian's expression. But the man's hands were still on her shoulders. She couldn't move her body. She pursed her pink lips and lifted her hand from the hot spring. Her hand was stained with water droplets and held the man's big palm. The girl's clear voice was very sweet. "Thank you, Ah Xian, for staying by my side during my advancement." Dmo Xian chuckled as he leaned forward a little. Almost his entire face was pillowed on her bare shoulder. His warm breath sprayed on her skin. The man's deep voice was magnetic and alluring. "I've stayed by your side for 3 days and just a word of thanks and you're going to dismiss me?" Following his words, his dark eyes were filled with a pitch-black darkness. Slightly tilting his eyes, his lips were on the girl's earlobe. And at the same time, the girl was tickled by the man's hair and looked at him sideways. His lips were on hers. The girl's fragrance was mixed with the fragrance of medicine, which was particularly tempting. Dmo Xian's deep as ink eyes dimmed. And Yiqing Luo, at the moment when their lips touched, she only felt the temperature of the hot springs suddenly rose. She was just about to move away. But her head was clasped by the man's big palm. The overbearing kiss fell on her lips fiercely. From this angle, Yiqing Luo felt that the man's eyes were getting more and more charming. But Dmo Xian quickly moved his lips away. His handsome and elegant face was faintly tainted with a trace of bewitching evil charm. His slender fingers brushed his thin lips. "I'm very satisfied with this way of expressing my thanks." Yiqing Luo's face suddenly flushed red. Dmo Xian narrowed his peach blossom eyes, looked at her blushing face, chuckled lightly and drew closer. "Do you know why you spent 3 days before you succeeded in your advancement?" That scorching hot airflow poured down. Yiqing Luo felt a kind of electric shock. Her body was numb for a moment. The temperature was also rising. Not only her face was boiling hot. Even her body started to heat up. She could tell that the displeasure in Dmo Xian's tone was related to this advancement. Her delicate body trembled and moved slightly, trying to pull away the distance between her and Dmo Xian. However, the man had no intention of letting Yiqing Luo escape. His slender fingers traced the contours of her shoulders and circled around her black hair that was hanging down her shoulders. Her black hair was twined around her finger. From time to time, it would brush against her delicate skin. The tip of Yiqing Luo's ears were boiling hot, her pink lips quivered, as if she understood the reason why Dmo Xian was angry. However, before she could open her mouth, Dmo Xian's hands suddenly wrapped around her body and he suddenly scooped her up. In the hot spring, her naked body was pulled into the man's arms. The fragrant water soaked the man's luxurious purple robe. Her naked body was also tightly covered by the man's robe. Beside her ear was the man's cold and mocking voice. "You need 3 days to successfully advance and wake up. This means that your advancement this time is not because of your strength, but because you have reached the opportunity to advance. Do you know the reason for your advancement?" He suddenly lowered his voice, and his tone was slightly cold. How would Yiqing Luo not understand the meaning behind Dmo Xian's words? Her body trembled, and her little hand climbed onto the man's shirt, wanting to speak. Chapter 40-47. So, this time, you spent an entire 3 days to completely digest the energy in your body. The voice beside her ear was very low. The distance was very close. His breath was also very close. But, Yiqing Luo had no romantic thoughts. With a start, her arms stretched out from the man's purple robe and circled around his neck, acting coquettishly. I know I'm wrong. It's my fault. I shouldn't have allowed the divine phoenix profound jade to absorb so much azure chi, this time's advancement. It was indeed taxing on her. She didn't expect that after releasing the divine phoenix profound jade's energy, the divine phoenix profound jade would be so happy with the azure chi. As if it couldn't wait to absorb all the chi in the spirit gathering array. Especially, finally, the third divine artifact automatically integrated into her body and signed a soul contract with her. Thus, she also inherited half of the third divine artifact's energy. She had just changed her body. How could she withstand the dual energy of the divine phoenix profound jade and the divine artifact? Luckily, Dmo Xian came just in time. Thinking of this, she suddenly raised her eyes slightly brightened, looking at his gaze, with some curiosity and some sparkles. Ah Xian, your blood, why can it suppress the energy in my body? The energy in her body settled down and slowly merged with her, allowing her to advance. She could be sure, it had something to do with the drop of blood that Dmo Xian fed into her mouth. Even at that time, her consciousness was already blurry because of the restless energy in her body. She could also roughly feel that when the man kissed her, that drop of blood slipped in. The young lady probably didn't know. This action of hers revealed so much. When the young lady lifted her jade lotus, the man only slightly lowered his eyes. He could clearly see the naked body under the purple robe in his arms. That delicate white skin instantly filled Dmo Xian's eyes. Dmo Xian's eyes dimmed even more. Indistinctly, there was a red glow of passion. He smiled, slightly lowered his eyes, smiling seductively. Want to know? Yi Qing Luo nodded. Dmo Xian's smile deepened, his head tilted down a little. Their four eyes met. From this angle, he could see the beauty of the young lady, in full view. His eyes flashed a dangerous deep meaning. His smile had a different meaning to it. The man's gaze was too scorching. How could Yi Qing Luo not understand? She shrunk into the man's embrace to cover her body. Seeing her actions, Dmo Xian only smiled. That smile was dangerous and demonic. Not only did my blood prevent your body from exploding, it also allowed you to ascend to the Sage Profound 6th grade. How will you repay me? His low and hoarse voice was seductive and bewitching. He even deliberately lowered his voice to make it sound even more magnetic. Nestled in Dmo Xian's arms, Yi Qing Luo felt her legs wobbling. Dmo Xian's brows curled up slightly as the corners of his eyes curled up. Why don't you pay with your body? As soon as he finished speaking, he kissed her. His warm lips seemed to want to devour her completely. Her black hair fell on her exposed skin. Yi Qing Luo's breathing shuddered and became heavier. Her delicate body, which had shrunk under the purple robe, trembled slightly because of the man's seductive movements. The numb girl was still struggling. You promised me that you wouldn't touch me during this period of time. Chapter 40-48. Yi Qing Luo's beautiful face was stained with a thin shade of red. Her eyes were misty like spring water, already aroused. Her voice was like a hook, with a light pant. You're now going back on your words. Dmo Xian suddenly stopped his actions. Half propped up on Yi Qing Luo's body, their four eyes met. The man's deep as ink eyes were like a whirlpool, swallowing her whole. Just when Yi Qing Luo was almost bewitched by Dmo Xian's deep peach blossom eyes. Dmo Xian's thin lips curled into a devilish smile. Plus that face. This smile, under this situation. It simply made one's whole body numb. Like an electric shock. Hasn't the imposter's matter been settled? Dmo Xian loved the expression of the person in his arms. He loved Lil Luo, the lovable look because of him. The fire in Dmo Xian's eyes burned even more. The young lady had no resistance, already lying beside the hot spring, on the smooth huge stone, along with her purple robe. Yi Qing Luo grabbed his wrist. The scorching heat seemed to be able to burn her. The scorching heat made her body heat up. What kind of solution is that? Yi Qing Luo's eyes glowed brightly like stars, dazzling and resplendent. Dmo Xian suddenly lowered his body. The distance between the two was so close that the tip of their nose was touching. The imposter's identity is already clear. If he still has a brain, he will not use my identity to appear in front of the public. Dmo Xian explained, with a reasonable attitude. Talking at such a close distance. His aura permeated everything about her. Dmo Xian's action was obviously to seduce her. Yiqing Luo almost couldn't control herself. The hand which was pressing on Dmo Xian's wrist tightened. I don't know who he is. The man suddenly bent his head, kissing her again. The slightly dangerous voice and overbearing action gave her no room to reject. Is my charm not enough, or Lil Luo has already floated? What happened to liking my face? Why, my face is right in front of you, how can you still think of other men? The punitive kiss, slightly heavy, even bit her. Yiqing Luo subconsciously moaned, crying out injustice in her heart. She was only curious who was the impostor of Dmo Xian. After all, he was able to imitate Dmo Xian to perfection. It was hard to find such a person in the world. How did pure curiosity turn into thinking about other men? Before she could explain herself, the man stopped her. The man moved his hands up and down as he said, besides, this is your way of repaying me, isn't it? Yiqing Luo, who had been unconscious for an unknown period of time. She clenched her fists. Her whole body was sore, and she bit her lips angrily. Men were indeed all stinking liars. Men are all pig trotters. Heh, men. Throw away the pig trotters. I don't want it anymore. Whoever wants it can take it. Yiqing Luo propped up her sore body and got up. Her body had already been cleaned up, and she was wearing neatly dressed undergarments. But Dmo Xian was nowhere to be seen. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips and gave a heavy humph. The previous few times, after torturing her, the system still knew to serve her. He had only served her a few times. But now he was gone. Heh, men. Cough, cough, cough. In the room, an awkward cough was heard. Chapter 40-49. Although Old Man Song was ridiculing him, but in his heart, he was extremely happy. Her face was full of smiles. Girl Luo was really, only in front of the venerable sovereign would she show her feminine side. Only then would she be more real. Old Man Song was truly rejoicing. For a Dmo Xian to appear by Yiqing Luo's side. He was also thankful from the bottom of his heart that Dmo Xian had appeared in Yiqing Luo's life. Old Song. Hearing Old Man Song's voice, the blush on Yiqing Luo's face stiffened. With a swish, her face turned even redder. You. When did you come out? Previously, her face was blushing. That was the color of spring. Now, Yiqing Luo's cheeks were flushed red. Old Man Song's spiritual body floated over. Dizun has something to deal with. He'll be back in 2 hours. I'll stay here to watch over you. In other words, Old Man Song had been in the room for a long time. After she woke up, her heart was full of cursing Dmo Xian's beastly behavior last night, totally not noticing it at all. She had lost all her face. Yiqing Luo wanted to cover her face and howl. But when he saw Old Man Song's spiritual body, he was startled for a moment. What's going on with you? Why is your spirit body so weak? In the cave. Old Man Song's spirit body was still very sturdy. Why did he look so thin and transparent, as if a gust of wind could blow him away? Old Man Song lowered his head, raised his hands, and looked at himself. He smiled as he shook his head. It's nothing, it's just a little accident. I'll be able to recover after resting in the Azure Dew bracelet for a period of time. As he spoke, he floated to the side of the bed. Get up, Dizun has prepared lunch for you in the kitchen. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as the smile on her face faded and her expression turned grave. You are like this, because of Xian? With Old Man Song's strength, plus the fact that he could enter and exit the Azure Dew bracelet at any time. How could he be injured by someone? Even his spirit body had become weak? Unless it was Old Man Song who volunteered. In addition, after Old Man Song heard her question, he didn't directly answer it and even deliberately changed the topic. Yi Qing Luo was certain. The person who turned Old Man Song into such a state was definitely someone she knew. Then only Dmo Xian could injure Old Man Song. After confirming this point, Yi Qing Luo went through the entire incident in her mind. He could also guess the reason why Dmo Xian made a move against Old Man Song. Yi Qing Luo pursed her lips tightly and lowered her head guiltily. Old Man Song, I'm sorry, it was because of her that Dmo Xian took action. Silly girl, why are you apologizing to me? I don't blame you or the Overlord. Old Man Song stretched out his hand and made a gesture of slapping Yi Qing Luo's head across the air. He smiled helplessly and shook his head. You almost exploded and died because the power in your body was too strong. This is indeed my fault. Di Zun should blame me. It's not your fault. Yi Qing Luo leaned against the headboard and lowered her eyes. I already have the whereabouts of the third divine relic, naturally I will not give up. Even if you don't tell me how to open the door of the passage, I will find a way to enter the enchantment of the divine relic. Furthermore, if I had been able to control the divine phoenix profound heart jade, would not have been in such a dire situation. So, in the end, it was all because of her greed that caused her to become like this. Old Man Song looked at Yi Qing Luo's slightly gloomy aura and his eyes flashed with some emotion. Chapter 40-50. His tone was obviously a little apprehensive. He seemed to be suppressing some sort of emotion. Yi Qing Luo raised her eyes, her bright as ink eyes quietly looked at Old Man Song. Those clean, pure eyes. This caused Old Man Song's heart to grow increasingly apprehensive. When he raised his head to meet Yi Qing Luo's gaze, he was rather cautious. Old Man Song, you know my personality very well, don't you? Yi Qing Luo's lips curled upwards as her brows carried a smile. I believe you, I should have told you these 4 words many times. He answered without hesitation. Just like in the cave, when he suggested for Yi Qing Luo to drip her blood into the eyes of the mural. Without any hesitation, he did as he was told. Just because Yi Qing Luo did it. That was why she was so close to bursting from the power, causing her body to explode and die. Actually, he had his own selfish motives. Old Man Song pursed his lips into a straight line. His aged face was filled with complicated emotions. The gaze he shot towards Yi Qing Luo was filled with guilt. Old Man Song's mood changed. Yi Qing Luo naturally felt it and saw it in her eyes. Old Man Song, will you hurt me? She was still smiling, and her eyes were gentle. Old Man Song didn't even think about it and reflexively replied, I won't. Yi Qing Luo smiled, isn't that enough? No matter what secrets you want to hide, as long as you treat me sincerely, that's enough. She never doubted Old Man Song's sincerity towards her. All along, it had always been Old Man Song who was always by her side. Back then, he had even wanted to sacrifice himself to save her. So what if he had a lot of secrets? It was not important. The Azure Dew bracelet was no ordinary object. As the artifact spirit of the Azure Dew bracelet, how could it be an ordinary person? Since he had chosen to contract the Azure Dew bracelet, he chose Old Man Song. She would trust Old Man Song unconditionally. She believed it too. When her strength reached the level that Old Man Song approved of, Old Man Song would definitely take the initiative to tell her all the secrets. Las Luo. He had to admit that Yi Qing Luo's words made his desolate heart feel a sense of warmth. He was a spiritual body. There is no heart. However, the warmth of his body and the uncontrollable shaking of his body were so real. Old Man Song let out a low laugh. His somewhat transparent, glowing hand covered his face, covering his slightly reddened eyes. He chuckled softly, as though he had finally let go of the boulder that had been weighing down on his heart. His voice was filled with ease, hiding a secret. How did you detect it? It's very obvious. Yi Qing Luo looked at him. Perhaps, you've never thought of hiding it from me, isn't it? Indeed. Old Man Song let go of his hand and met Yi Qing Luo's gaze. These matters will eventually have to be told to you, it's just that, now is not the time. I know. Yi Qing Luo had no intention to interrogate him. I believe in you, just like how you believe in me, that's enough. The smile on Old Man Song's face grew even wider. That old face was covered with a relaxed and sincere smile. Under this warm and kind smile, his spirit body slowly floated into the azure dew bracelet. Yi Qing Luo lowered her eyes as she caressed the bracelet on her wrist and looked at it for a long time. Afterwards, she laughed lightly, lifted the quilt, and got up from the bed. Regarding Old Man Song, she didn't intend to question or satisfy her curiosity. The secret that Old Man Song was hiding was related to the sovereign of the divine emperors. Chapter 40-51. Old Man Song's attitude towards the divine emperor was very complicated. It was respect that emanated from his bones. Moreover, Old Man Song and the divine emperor's faces were filled with nostalgia. Presumably, Old Man Song was definitely acquainted with the divine emperor, and their relationship could definitely be considered close. To be able to have such a close relationship with someone as noble as the divine emperor, Old Man Song's identity wasn't simple either. She had previously said that she would think of a way to help Old Man Song recover his true body. And after that, the days ahead were probably going to be even more dangerous. These were all areas that she could not explore at the moment. Now, he was still not strong enough. In the face of many things, he was still in a passive state. This time, it was her carelessness that allowed the palace of gloomy darkness to take advantage of them. Yi Qing Luo slowly clenched her fists tightly. He felt the dark force in his body circulating through his limbs and bones. The smile at the corner of his mouth gradually became firm. She would work harder, even more powerful. After washing up, Yi Qing Luo ate the lunch that Dmo Xian had specially prepared for her. He strolled around the area for a while. Dmo Xian was nowhere to be seen. Wearing a veil, she sat on the first floor of the inn, drinking tea and listening to the gossip around her. She felt bored. Just as he was about to get up and return to his room, he heard someone from the next table say, "Do you guys think that the matter regarding the Empyrean Fairy in Shadowless City is true?" The person beside him said, "It must be true. If it was fake, the Overlord would have killed her already, wouldn't he?" That's right, that's the Overlord. If the mysterious fairy of Shadowless City had lied, would the Overlord allow her to live until now? Shadowless City's mysterious maiden, Overlord, these few words fell into Yi Qing Luo's ears. The body that let her stand up slowly sat back down. Are these people talking about the real and fake venerable sovereign? It had already been a few days since the incident. Why were they still so interested in gossiping? She wanted to hear how the other citizens viewed the matter of Mu Qilan and the impostor. In the past 3 days, Dmo Xian did not bring her back to the Qiao family. Instead, he found a small inn in the main city of Shadowless City. They were probably worried that she would take too long to level up and cause everyone to worry about her. So he didn't go back. He didn't expect to hear gossip about himself here. She overheard the gossip at the next table, and naturally, other people heard it as well. Immediately, the people at the other table came over and said, "The Overlord loves Madame D very much. He would never do anything to betray her. What deep as the ocean? That's just a show for us ordinary people. Otherwise, why would the Empyrean Fairy of Shadowless City appear? There's no smoke without fire. If the mysterious Fairy of Shadowless City really has nothing going on with the Overlord, how would she dare to say that she slept with the Overlord in front of him?" The people at the other table were rebuked, and their expressions darkened. "I'm afraid you guys don't know. I heard that a few days ago, there were 2 venerable sovereigns who looked exactly the same. The mysterious Fairy of Shadowless City thought that the venerable sovereign who was related to her was actually a fake imposter. Why is it different from what I heard?" The person sitting at the next table told him what he had heard. Isn't that impostor the Overlord's Lady Emperor's secret guard who deliberately pretended to be the Overlord in an attempt to ruin the reputation of Shadowless City's ferry? Chapter 4052. The boss of Jubao is Lady D's friend. Of course he would speak for Lady D. That's right, young man. You're still too naive. The person at the next table patted the shoulder of the person at the other table. Then he continued, and, a few days ago, didn't the mysterious fairy of Shadowless City return to the Chow Mansion? It was Lady D's friends who brought her back personally. These days, the mysterious fairy of Shadowless City has been staying at the Chow Mansion. The Overlord is staying at the Chow Mansion. The mysterious fairy of Shadowless City has been brought to the Chow Mansion. But Lady D hasn't returned yet. What does this mean? It means Lady D is going to be replaced. The person at the next table clicked his tongue. Then he noticed that the person at the other table had an ugly look on his face. He pretended to be mysterious as he patted the person's shoulder and whispered, "Young man, since we're fated to meet today, I have a piece of news that no one else knows." Everyone's curiosity was piqued. The person at the next table gathered everyone together and whispered, "I heard. The Overlord is completely enraged because Lady D used a substitute to impersonate him, so," he paused and purposely kept them in suspense, "you must keep it a secret. Don't dawdle. Tell us." "So what? What happened?" Hearing the urgency in their voices, the person at the next table smiled in satisfaction and continued, "So Lady D has been killed by the Overlord himself." "Wah. What?" The few of them cried out in shock. The person at the next table immediately covered their mouths. Shoo. Shoo. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Their faces were full of shock and disbelief. That person tried to rope in the crowd again and continued in a low voice, "Don't doubt me, these words. I heard it from the Empyrean fairy of Shadowless City and her rich friends. Now, His Majesty is looking for a suitable opportunity to make her the real Madam of the Emperor." Everyone looked at each other with different expressions. Gossip was one thing. It was one thing to think that the mysterious fairy of Shadowless City and the Overlord had something going on. But, if the Overlord killed the Lady D and wanted to make the mysterious fairy of Shadowless City official? This didn't seem like something the Overlord would do, that was too much. Furthermore, if compared, the Imperial Lady's appearance, strength, and boldness were all above the mysterious fairy of Shadowless City. Abandoning the beautiful jade that was the monarch's wife, he chose the stone that was the mystic fairy of Shadowless City. Only an idiot would make such a decision, right? To be honest, I don't want to believe that the Overlord is such a person, but the truth is. The person at the next table shook his head and sighed. "Just wait and see. You'll know in a few days." "Is it true that the Empyrean maiden of Shadowless City said it herself?" someone asked. "Of course, I heard it with my own ears when she said it to those ladies." That person patted his chest and said, "She said that the Imperial Madam is already dead, and she sounded so sure. How could this be false? If it was fake, wouldn't it be exposed when the Emperor's wife appeared? Since the mysterious lady of Shadowless City was so certain, it couldn't be false." The few of them sighed. For a moment, they didn't know what to say and just stared blankly at that person. Whereas Yiqing Luo, who was eavesdropping on the gossip, her face under the veil twitched a few times. Although the voices of those people were very soft. Chapter 4053. When did she die? Or was she killed by Dmo Xian personally? The people involved in this topic were all dumbstruck. She told a lie. She had to use numerous lies to cover it up. Mu Qilan was addicted to lying to others. She even dared to say that she was killed by Dmo Xian personally. She was certain that she was dead. She thought that after she was brought away by the vines, she died in the West Cliff Mountain, that mountain which was filled with Yin Qi. Even if she was really dead, the title of Imperial Madam would not belong to her, Mu Qilan. Mu Qilan was really wishful thinking. Yi Qing Luo sneered. Looked like she had to make a trip back to the Qiao residence. Let's see what kind of ridiculous joke Mu Qilan could come up with. Yi Qing Luo threw out a piece of crystal and placed it on the table as she got up and walked out of the inn. Look at that person. The few people who were gossiping at the next table were attracted by a flash of red. They only had time to see that slender back view. Her red dress fluttered and her temperament was otherworldly. Just a back view made one feel as though she was a nine heavens mysterious lady who had descended. That lady, when was she in this inn? Such an outstanding lady, they actually didn't notice her from the start till the end? Don't you feel that? That back view looks a little familiar? Red dress, otherworldly temperament, nine heavens mysterious lady, why, I suddenly thought of Imperial Madam? Qiao residence. Mu Qilan and a few young ladies stood at the entrance of the courtyard as their expressions were distorted and filled with rage. At the entrance of the courtyard stood two upright figures. A man and a woman. The man's expression was grave and stern and rigid. The woman's features were beautiful, elegant and otherworldly. At this moment, both of them raised one hand and blocked the entrance of the courtyard, blocking Mu Qilan's path. You two lowly slaves. Don't you know who this sacred lady is? How dare you block this sacred lady's path? Mu Qilan shouted angrily. The woman was expressionless as she replied calmly, this is the Overlord's order. Sacred lady is the Overlord's woman. And your future mistress. The young ladies beside Mu Qilan straightened their backs as they sneered. The woman's eyes moved slightly but she remained expressionless. Imperial Palace's mistress, there's only Qing Luo alone. You. Hearing the name Yi Qing Luo, Mu Qilan's expression sunk. Then, he sneered and raised his head, revealing an arrogant smile. You're just a small secret guard of the Overlord. What right do you have to interfere with the Overlord's decisions? That's right, who do you think you are? Believe it or not, once the Holy Maiden becomes the Emperor's wife, the first person she will target is you. Get out of the way. The Holy Virgin is going to find His Majesty now. A few young misses clamored, pushing and shoving, wanting to escort Mu Qilan out of the courtyard. The woman who intercepted him didn't move at all, and her expression didn't change in the slightest. I'm not qualified, and neither are you. The few of them pushed and shoved. But he still couldn't leave the courtyard. The young ladies also knew that this seemingly delicate and elegant woman in front of them was not weak at all. They were afraid that they would not be able to gain any advantage. Mu Qilan's expression darkened. She felt that she had lost her dignity in front of Lord Dizun's subordinates. She stared at the woman for a long time. Mu Qilan's lips suddenly curled upwards, revealing a cold smile as she ridiculed, this sacred lady knows that your relationship with Yi Qing Luo isn't bad, but, some things, you have to accept the reality. Yi Qing Luo she is already dead. Chapter 40-54. Mu Qilan couldn't help but cover the corner of her mouth when she saw that the effect had been achieved. She chuckled. The person you want to curry favor with is no longer in this world. What's the point of pretending to be loyal? Humans should learn to be smarter and choose a good tree to nest in. If you curry favor with the wrong person, the consequences won't be light. Mocking words entered her ears one after another. The woman's gloomy face grew uglier. She clenched her fists. When she looked up again, her beautiful eyes were filled with endless coldness. She moved her fingers, and the wind from her palms slammed down on Mu Qilan. Swish, the violent wind howled. Mu Qilan didn't expect the woman to dare to make a move. The palm fell. No matter how fast her reaction was. That delicate cheek was also brushed by the wind from the palm. Bright red blood rolled down her face. Mu Qilan let out a shrill scream and covered her face with her hands. The woman's palm missed, but she didn't intend to stop. She raised her hands again, and profound energy shot out, but, before the palm could land on the ground, her wrist was suddenly grabbed by a hand. He stopped her attack. That wide palm carried a familiar warmth. The woman didn't need to look up to know who stopped her. Beiyuan. The man's deep voice sounded. He pulled the woman's hand and pressed it down. Don't mess around. That's right. The two people guarding the courtyard entrance were Tang Beiyuan and Lang Lixian. Her fiancé grabbed her wrist, and he had a "don't mess around" expression on his face. Tang Beiyuan's heart hurt as if it was being pricked by a needle. Seeing Tang Beiyuan being restrained. The few rich young ladies who were standing in front of Mu Qilan, but felt guilty, heaved a sigh of relief. Mu Qilan covered her face, and looked at Tang Beiyuan with hatred and ruthlessness. What are you staring at? Believe it or not, I'll dig out your eyes. Tang Beiyuan's heart was burning with anger. Her arms struggled hard against Lang Lixian, and she vented her anger on Mu Qilan. Lang Lixian held her hand even tighter, his face expressionless, and he didn't move. He was probably sure that Lang Lixian wouldn't let Tang Beiyuan do anything to him. Only then did Mu Qilan relax. Looking at Tang Beiyuan's furious expression, a glint flashed across Mu Qilan's eyes. I'll tell you another secret. The Madame D that you've been thinking about is not only dead, but she died in the hands of Lord Dizun. Do you know that? Nonsense. There was no way Tang Beiyuan would believe such nonsense. However, after listening to Mu Qilan's confident rumor, Yi Zichen couldn't help but sigh. She couldn't help but want to tear Mu Qilan's mouth apart. Lang Lixian, let go of me. Tang Beiyuan struggled, trying to break free from Lang Lixian's imprisonment. Lang Lixian frowned slightly. Don't mess around. Tang Beiyuan's nose turned sour. She did not know if it was Lang Lixian's attitude that had hurt her heart. Lang Lixian's strength was too great, and it hurt her. Mu Qilan looked at the interaction between the two people in front of her, and the corners of her mouth curled into a proud smile. She looked at Lang Lixian. This holy lady admires smart people like you. After this holy lady becomes the Madame Dizun, I will definitely put in a good word for you in front of Lord Dizun. Lang Lixian frowned, but he ignored her. Instead, he kept staring at Tang Beiyuan's face. He looked at Tang Beiyuan's red eyes. He pursed his lips and wanted to say something. Suddenly, a clamor of shouting came from not far away. Chapter 40-55. Tang Beiyuan's expression was dark as she glanced at Lang Lixian. After Lang Lixian saw the housekeeper, he let go of her arm. But his body moved a few steps. It stood between her and Mu Qilan. It was as if he was worried that she would suddenly attack Mu Qilan. The sight of him, protecting Mu Qilan, caused Tang Beiyuan's eyes to sting. She withdrew her gaze and suppressed the sourness in her heart. She took a deep breath and looked at the housekeeper. What happened? Those who are still and without embroiling city have all gathered at the Qiao Manor. They're all asking if Madame D is really dead, and they're all clamoring to see the Empyrean Fairy of Shadowless City. The butler immediately repeated, his face full of anxiety. The patriarch asked me to inform you that he might not be able to suppress it. Mistress is dead? Tang Beiyuan instinctively looked at Mu Qilan. Earlier, Mu Qilan had said delightfully and confidently. Yi Qing Luo was already dead. And he died in the hands of Dmo Xian. How could Mu Qilan be so sure that Yi Qing Luo was dead? She didn't believe it. How could a lady like Yi Qing Luo die so easily? Moreover, the overlord would rather die than to let Yi Qing Luo suffer any harm. How could he possibly kill Yi Qing Luo with his own hands? This must be Mu Qilan's doing. Tang Beiyuan's eyes flickered as she looked at the butler. They've heard about the Lady Emperor's death. Why would they want to meet the Empyrean Fairy of Shadowless City? The butler wiped the sweat off his forehead and shook his head. This lowly one doesn't know either, just as he was speaking. In front of them, about 20 people swarmed toward their courtyard. Walking at the forefront was the gloomy Qiao family head. It was obvious that he was infuriated by these major forces. When Mu Qilan heard the butler's words, a sense of joy welled up in her heart. Then, he saw more than 20 people from various factions rushing over. Moreover, they were all here for the matter of the Imperial Madam's death. She became even more excited. Who would have thought that the news would spread so quickly? She had purposely brought up the matter of Yiqing Luo being killed by Dmo Xian to the ladies in the morning. At this moment, it had already spread like wildfire. She could finally stand next to the overlord openly. Finally, she could hear everyone respectfully call her Madam D. This position should have belonged to her. As long as he could deal with this group of people in front of him, by then, even if Dmo Xian wanted to settle the scores, in order to maintain the overlord's reputation, he would have to obediently let her be the Imperial Madam. So what if Yiqing Luo wasn't killed by Dmo Xian? Anyway, Yiqing Luo was already dead, so the dead could not testify. No matter how Dmo Xian explained, he still had to bear the infamy of killing Yiqing Luo with his own hands. As for her, it had already come to this. The Linglong Palace would also give up on her after she lost her virginity to that impostor. She did not expect Dmo Xian to fall in love with her. Therefore, she did not need any feelings. She only needed the identity of the imperial concubine. That was enough. Just as Mu Qilan was fantasizing about the bright future, Patriarch Xiao and more than 20 people from the major forces walked over. The events in Without Embroiling City came one after another. On top of that, Di Zun was in Without Embroiling City. Another old man from the Huangfu family, one of the Heaven Realm's 4 great families, appeared. Chapter 4056. Because of this, those powerhouses who appeared in Mu Qilan's courtyard all had rather high statuses in the various main cities. Patriarch Xiao. Tang Beiyuan's expression was solemn as she swept a glance at those 20 over people and kept her emotions as she greeted Patriarch Xiao. Patriarch Xiao nodded and looked at Mu Qilan with an unfriendly expression. Shadowless City's mysterious young lady, today the entire Without Embroiling City is discussing a false rumor. May I know if you know about it? His tone was very stiff. It wasn't a question, but he was already certain that this rumor had something to do with Mu Qilan. Hearing Patriarch Xiao's words, Mu Qilan kept away the complacency in her eyes as she revealed an astonished expression. What rumor? The overlord was worried that I had suffered a shock in Westcliff Mountain, so he had asked me to stay in the Qiao residence to recuperate properly. I have never left the Qiao residence, so I don't know about the rumors outside. Her words revealed that she had a close relationship with Dmo Xian. Oh. Really? Patriarch Xiao naturally didn't believe her. According to what I know, the overlord arranged for you to stay in the Qiao residence, not to let you recuperate. Before the overlord left, he specially instructed me to watch your every move. He paused as his tone was filled with ridicule. This kind of reminder doesn't seem to be because he was worried about you. Mu Qilan had not expected Patriarch Xiao to directly tear down her stage. Instantly, her exquisite and beautiful face became a little twisted. However, when his gaze swept across the people behind Xiao family head and the various forces, Mu Qilan suppressed the surging anger in her chest as she raised her head slightly and spoke without any change in expression. This sacred young lady knows that Patriarch Xiao admires Miss Yi very much, so you are unable to accept the overlord's choice. But, since things have already developed to this stage, if Patriarch Xiao still wants to befriend the overlord, then you should see the reality clearly and accept this truth. She didn't reply Patriarch Xiao's words directly. Instead, she intentionally incited the crowd. With just a few words, he was clearly informing the crowd. Patriarch Xiao's words were merely a lie which he intentionally said for Yiqing Luo. Reminding everyone again. The truth was right in front of them. If they wanted to befriend the overlord, then they should treat her as the new imperial madam. Perhaps she would also whisper pillow talk to Di Zun and the others. It was indeed a little shocking for a woman to say such words. However, he had to admit it. These words. His words struck a chord in the hearts of many people from various forces. The reason why they stayed in Without Embroiling City. Wasn't it all for Di Zun? Even though Yi Qing Luo had painstakingly saved the entire Earth domain without embroiling city's auction. But their focus was still on the D-Zune. Initially he thought that if he could get on Yi Qing Luo's good side, he would be able to get on the Overlord's good side. After all, the Treasures Gathering Hall and the Qiao Estate were like that. But he had not expected Yi Qing Luo to have such a strong temperament at such a young age. Regardless of whether it was a temptation or a hint, Yi Qing Luo didn't have any intention to deepen the relationship with them. Yi Qing Luo's attitude was the Overlord's attitude. For them, Yi Qing Luo was just like the Overlord, they were all pressuring existences. Now, the Emperor's wife had changed. It wasn't a bad choice. At least when facing the Empyrean ferry of Shadowless City. They wouldn't have the feeling of empty pressing down on them until they couldn't breathe. Most importantly, the Empyrean ferry of Shadowless City was different from Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo had no desires and no conditions could tempt her. Chapter 4057. As long as the conditions were set, Shadowless City's mysterious NV would definitely be able to reach a consensus with them. It would be much more convenient for them to make any transactions. Very quickly, some powerhouses asked in a probing manner, "I heard that Imperial Madam had died 3 days ago. Is this news true? How did you all?" Mu Qilan's beautiful eyes widened as though she was extremely shocked as she subconsciously opened her mouth. The words were at the tip of her tongue when she seemed to have thought of something as she forced a smile. "Where did you hear this news from?" "Imperial Madam Shi, how could she possibly be dead?" Her expression, in addition to her words. That was an act of trying to cover up. Everyone's eyes flashed past a sliver of understanding as they continued asking, "Since Imperial Madam is fine, then why? Haven't we seen her for the past few days?" If I didn't guess wrongly. These few days, the people at the auction house seemed to be secretly searching for Imperial Madam. And the Overlord has also not been seen for the past few days. One must know that previously, Yi Qing Luo was able to create new topics every day, making everyone discuss. But these 3 days, Yi Qing Luo seemed to have suddenly disappeared. There was no news at all. Following that was today. The news of Yi Qing Luo's death suddenly spread. This made the crowd doubt this rumor. The few powerhouses started another round of questioning. Mu Qilan's face turned pale from the questioning as her gaze kept shifting back and forth on the crowd, as though she was panicking. After some time, she pursed her red lips tightly. "I believe everyone is very clear that Imperial Madam doesn't like me. The Overlord had arranged for me to stay in the Qiao residence these few days and didn't ask Imperial Madam to find trouble with me, so. The questions you asked, I don't know." The more Mu Qilan said that, the more everyone felt that. The news that they had heard was true. All of their gazes towards Mu Qilan had some changes. If Mu Qilan really became the next Imperial Madam, now was the time to hug Mu Qilan's thigh. Everyone's gazes met and Patriarch Qiao saw it all. His expression instantly sunk terrifyingly. "Heh, what a good don't know. Shadowless City's mysterious NV, you're in my Qiao residence. Do you really think I don't know everything that you've done?" He sneered in anger. "You know better than anyone else how the news of Madame D's death got out and made everyone know about it." A dark light flashed across Mu Qilan's drooping eyes. The people from the various superpowers did not care about this at all. How did the news get out? It was not important. The important thing was this news true? Naturally, they knew very well that as the Empyrean Lady of Shadowless City, Mu Qilan, who was related to the Overlord and had the potential to become the next Overlord's wife, how could she be a naive person? "Mysterious Maiden of Shadowless City, we only want to know if this matter is true or false. Also, we also heard that the Emperor's wife was killed by the Overlord. Is this true?" Mu Qilan pondered for a moment. With Patriarch Qiao around, she could forget about pretending to be a White Lotus and removing all the blame from herself. Originally they thought that by pretending not to know anything and luring everyone to believe that Yi Qing Luo was really dead. At that time, even if Di-Zun were to blame him, he would not be able to do so. She could still feign ignorance. He was also innocent, and he had been dragged into this inexplicably. Chapter 40-58. Mu Qilan raised her head slightly, revealing her exquisite and beautiful face to the crowd. The expression on her face was no longer the flustered and stubborn expression of hiding the secret for Dmo Xian. Instead, her red lips curled into a proud smile. Yes, I can confirm that the Imperial Madam is dead. She slowed down her tone and enunciated each word clearly. Every word was like a clap of thunder, striking the hearts of the crowd. Nonsense. Tang Beiyuan's eyes reddened as she berated him. Mu Qilan glanced at her, her smile widening. I was there at the scene, and I saw the Imperial Madam breathe her last with my own eyes. She paused, then smiled maliciously. You don't know how desperate Madame D was at that time. Unfortunately, she didn't even have the chance to struggle. She died, just like that. Mu Qilan. Tang Beiyuan gritted her teeth. Her eyes were filled with anger as she spat out Mu Qilan's name. She clenched her fists tightly, as if she was going to charge at Mu Qilan in the next second. However, Langley Xian was the first to grab her arm and pull her into his embrace. If this was any other time, Tang Beiyuan would definitely blush and her heart would palpitate. She would be so mesmerized that she would forget all her unhappiness and worries and be filled with hope for their relationship once again. But, at this moment, Tang Beiyuan felt cold all over. It was a bone-chilling coldness. She was angry. He was angry because of Yi Qing Luo. It was not just loyalty to the matriarch. It was also because he cared about Yi Qing Luo as a friend. However, Langley Xian did not understand her. Clearly, he had believed Mu Qilan's words. He really felt that there was a special relationship between Mu Qilan and Lord Di-Zun. Therefore, as Di-Zun's most loyal secret guard, Di-Zun had no choice but to obey. He would protect Di-Zun unconditionally. No matter how much she hated Mu Qilan. No matter how angry or frustrated she was. None of them could resist a single order from His Majesty. She probably didn't exist in his heart. Her insistence, her wishful thinking, in the end, felt like a joke. She let out a low laugh. His anger, and his desire to vent it on Mu Qilan, all died down in an instant. She lowered her eyes, and silently leaned into Langley Xian's embrace. His face was expressionless. The person in his arms quieted down, so quiet that it was a little strange. Langley Xian frowned and looked down at Tang Beiyuan. Tang Beiyuan lowered her head, so her expression could not be seen. Langley Xian only felt a little strange. Just as he was about to say something, he was interrupted by Mu Qilan's voice. Very angry? Very angry? Do you want to kill me? He, so what if you kill this mysterious fairy? You still can't hide the truth, can you? Mu Qilan's eyes were filled with a smug and flamboyant smile. He seemed to have seen through the relationship between Tang Beiyuan and Langley Xian. She even deliberately provoked him. Furthermore, with that loyal dark guard around, even if you want to kill this mysterious fairy, you will have to see if he agrees or not. Tang Beiyuan didn't even lift her head. His emotions did not fluctuate or change in the slightest. She was so quiet. Langley Xian couldn't help but lower his head to look at the person in his arms. His brows creased even tighter. Tang Beiyuan didn't respond and Mu Qilan felt that it was pointless, so she hurriedly continued to bring the topic back to Yi Qing Luo. This mysterious fairy has already said what you want to know. Now, what other questions do you have? Chapter 40-59. It was one thing to hear that Madame D was dead. It was a completely different matter to hear the relevant person admit it with his own ears. It felt completely different, okay? Shadowless City's Empyrean fairy's tone was so certain that she did not seem to be lying. After all, this kind of lie was too easy to expose. Moreover, if this matter was really fake, The overlord and Yiqing Luo should have come out at the first instance to refute the rumors. Mu Qilan raised her chin slightly and smiled haughtily. Every single rumor that has been spread out is true. She paused for a moment and deliberately slowed down her speech. Word by word, she said, including the news that Di Furan was killed by Di Zun. Everyone's expression changed unpredictably again. All of them were so shocked that they didn't know what to say. Madame Di was dead. Moreover, Di Zun had personally killed him. She had seen how much the overlord doted on Madame Di. No one could imagine the scene of His Majesty attacking Madame Di. Have you ever wondered who could kill a woman as powerful as the Emperor's wife, who had treasures and terrifying battle pets, without giving her a chance to struggle? Mu Qilan's smile widened. That's right. Mu Qilan's smile widened. There was no one else but the overlord. This was the thought that flashed through everyone's mind. Looks like the rumors that he had heard were all true. I didn't expect the overlord to be such a heartless person. He was actually so ruthless. How heartless of him to turn hostile. But, thinking about it, it made sense. People like Di Zun, who were high and mighty. Who in the world could blaspheme him? In his eyes, women were merely an external object. Of course, none of this had anything to do with them. The overlord's gossip was not something that people like them could guess. I see. I didn't expect His Majesty to value Lady Mystic Fairy so much that he even killed His Majesty. Oh, even Lady Night for her. Ever since Miss Yi used the Overlord's substitute secret guard to impersonate the Overlord, I've felt that. Miss Yi doesn't deserve the Overlord at all. Lord Mystic Fairy, congratulations. Looks like you'll be able to fulfill your wish in a few days. It was just a short period of silence. Immediately, people began to flatter him. With smiles on their faces, they cupped their fists at Mu Qilan. She even moved closer to Mu Qilan's direction. More than 20 people came over. At least more than half of the people gathered around Mu Qilan. As for the other half, they were thinking about the consequences. Some of them were unable to believe that the overlord was such a fickle and heartless person, and were unable to believe that Yiqing Luo, such a strong and confident person, would die so silently. Flattering words and Mu Qilan's complacent laughter. All of them were provoking Patriarch Xiao. These people had no bottom line. No conscience at all. Inhumane. Yiqing Luo was considered as their savior. He was the benefactor who had saved the entire land. These people were indifferent towards Yiqing Luo. Human nature is cold and heartless. Mu Qilan's complacent and arrogant voice rang in his ears. Well said. Once I become the Empress, I will do my best to fulfill all of your requests. There's no need to thank me. Since the Overlord has chosen this mysterious fairy should be the Overlord's right-hand man and help the Overlord manage the Imperial Palace. Her complacent tone made it clear that she had already regarded herself as the future mistress of the Imperial Palace. Chapter 4060. That clapping sound, at this juncture, was extremely attention-grabbing. Everyone looked towards the direction of the sound. Immediately after, they saw a dazzling fiery figure, appearing in front of everyone's eyes. The young lady clapped her hands as she walked in elegant steps, slowly walking closer. Her dress fluttered, like a burning flame. Even though the person who came was wearing a veil, concealing that devastatingly beautiful face. But, when everyone saw the young lady in front of them, the first figure that appeared in their minds was Yiqing Luo. In this world, there was no one who could wear a simple red dress without any patterns, in such a dazzling manner. It made one totally unable to shift their gaze away. That was what everyone thought. Mu Qilan was the same. The moment she saw the red-robed young lady appear, Mu Qilan's mind instantly went blank. As though there was a buzzing sound reverberating in her ears. Her entire body turned stiff and cold, unable to move. It was Yiqing Luo. How could she possibly appear? Wasn't she already dead? She saw Yi Qing Luo being taken away by the vines with her own eyes. She saw the Overlord leaving the West Cliff Mountain alone, with a heavy and sorrowful expression. Obviously, after searching for Yi Qing Luo, there was nothing. Why? Why was Yi Qing Luo still alive? This was impossible. Numerous voices kept colliding in Mu Qiulan's mind. It was as if something was about to explode in his mind. You are. One of the forces stared at the young lady in front of them, taking the lead to break the deadlock. Everyone then reacted, as pairs of curious and puzzled gazes swept towards Yi Qing Luo. Who am I? The young lady's clear voice, obviously carrying a smile, but when it entered everyone's ears, it made one's back inexplicably chilly. It was as if something cold was strangling his heart. The young lady was still laughing in a low voice. Her laughter was pleasing to the ears, like pearls falling onto a plate, extremely pleasant to listen to. But every single sound was like a huge rock, falling onto everyone's hearts. Actually, I'm also very curious, who should I be now? The young lady continued speaking, as her slender fair fingers gently placed on her veil, lightly tapping her pink lips, as her smile deepened. After all, in everyone's mouth, I'm already a dead person. The young girl's words were like a clap of thunder, striking everyone's hearts. Pairs of doubtful eyes turned into shock and disbelief. It was also faintly mixed with fear and panic. You're Yi. Madam Emperor? Everyone's hearts trembled. The young girl tilted her head, and a strand of her fine black hair fell over her shoulder, making her look like a fairy who had mistakenly entered the mortal world. However, the words that came out of her mouth were chilling. Imperial Madam? Isn't the Madame D that everyone is looking for over there? How can a dead person like me bear the responsibility? She pointed at Mu Qiulan, who was standing there stiffly. Everyone couldn't help but shiver, their eyes filled with shock. This was absolutely Yi Qing Luo herself. Other than the Overlord and Yi Qing Luo, no one could make them feel so pressured. Those people from the forces who had flattered Mu Qiulan just now felt a chill run down their spines, and their bodies began to tremble. What they just said, apparently it had been transmitted to Yi Qing Luo's ears. Oh no. They shouldn't have listened to Mu Qiulan's one-sided words just now. This time round, he had completely offended Yi Qing Luo. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.